Hello, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of the Diversity and Humanity Virtual Summit. I am your host, Kayleigh O'Keefe, the founder of Soul Excellence Publishing. And over the course of the last 2 days, you've really been able to soak in the wisdom and the love, honestly, from the best-selling authors of our brand new book, The Diversity and Humanity. If you haven't picked up your copy yet, please do so. It's on Kindle, it's on print. We all have our copies. And I'm so excited for this next conversation. It's a Soul Excellence First, where we are bringing you not only 2 of the authors in the book, but 2 lifelong friends. And so I am really excited to be joined by Karen Borofski, a healthcare executive, Reggie Hall, leadership development executive, who are friends, who are Air Force veterans. And now you can both claim that you are best-selling authors. Welcome to each of you, and just give us a peek into what this past week has been like for you.
KB, I'll let you go first.
Okay. Actually, this week has been amazing. Coming off, finishing the writing and editing, and which was totally novel. This first time endeavor for me. Scary, but exciting. And the family's been so supportive, friends coming out of the woodwork saying, I didn't know you were doing this. And I didn't know about your specific topic, that it was on your nerves. And so it's been great. And the other authors, I wish I would have had more time to spend with them, but they're just incredible. And listening yesterday, I was taking notes and learned about coopetition from James Jackson and, new terms like that. So it's been such a great learning experience, and I tend to be more of an introvert. So this has kind of forced me out of my comfort zone.
And you've really been doing amazing. And for those that have read your chapter, which we'll talk about, appropriately called My Name is Karen, you are such a gifted writer, a talented researcher, storyteller. Like, I'm completely shocked that this was your first foray into writing, and I certainly hope that it's not the last. So excited to dig into your chapter, and of course, sort of the backdrop in your personal life, what's been going on as this book has come into the world. So we'll get to that. I'm so excited, though, that this week has been a highlight for you. Reggie, what's going on in your world?
Oh, so much. So first of all, Kayleigh, thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this journey, right? For your vision, your courage, your ability to bring, as Karen said, all of these talented people together from diverse backgrounds, the harmony that we had in our group, the way we were able to kind of grow and develop our stories through our calls, and then just what you're doing to try to help heal the world, right? So hats off to you. I'm so glad I met you, and I'm so glad that you brought me along on this ride. I sent you an email the other night saying, I don't want the ride to stop. I feel like I'm at like an amusement park, right? And your time's coming up and there's the guy there that's waiting for you, and you just want to like stay on the roller coaster again, right?
Like, let's do it one more time. Yeah,
let's just keep going around one more time. But for me, it's been euphoric, right? And I'm introverted by nature too. Not as much as KB, and I'm glad that she's getting to blossom in front of everyone and how talented she is. So that's one of my bucket list things. That's why I invited her to join us together. It's a bucket list for me to be doing this with my lifelong friend. So thank you for that too. So I don't get super excited about stuff usually, but I've been like almost giddy about this, right? Just, I've written some things, and so I know what it feels like to be published. But I'm surprised at my reaction, right? Because like I said, I feel like a little kid again. It's like you revive that inner spirit in my soul that I'll talk about later today too, just reconnecting with the true you, right? And so I'm excited, right? Like excited. And I don't get excited a lot. Like my wife says, Reggie, do you have a pulse, right? I'm like, dude. So it feels nice to be excited, right? To have that coursing through you.
I mean, as we gathered last Friday, so many of us were sharing how it felt like Christmas morning, like, let me see the book. Oh my gosh, like it's in this digital age too. And of course the digital copy, like the feeling, the holding, the paper, the highlighting too, like feels very exciting. And, as you're sharing, Reggie, like it really speaks, I think, to kind of the age that we're living in, where it's like, if we get so excited and if we feel that childlike wonder, like it's the first thing that a cynical world will like shut down and be like, well, that's not that special. You didn't write a full book. Like just the like things that can come back at you. And so to be able to like hold on to that childlike wonder, that euphoric feeling, and allow that out of ourselves, I think is super, super important. And I'm just glad to hear that you've expressed or experienced that this week.
Along those lines, though, right? It's our true nature, right? So that exuberance, that innocence, right? That connectiveness, that courage to be fully expressed, as you say, and just be yourself. I remember there was a show called The Wiggles way back when, right? Like a kids show. And I remember when I was in preschool, the teacher in the morning would say, and in kindergarten, like, wiggle it out, right? Okay, everybody, let's wiggle it out, right? And get ready to be yourself, right? And if you go watch those classrooms, those kids they're not holding themselves back, and they're not ashamed of themselves. They're just being who they are, and they're happy being who they are. And I think we lose that as we come into adulthood. But this, I've learned so much in this group, and that's one of the things, right? It's okay to be yourself as an adult. Right? There's times to be serious. There's a season for everything, but it's okay to have fun in what you're doing. It's okay to be joyful in what you do. There's nothing wrong with that.
I feel like we've already hit on our first takeaway for the conversation for our audience. Like, note to self, wiggle it out. All right. Like, that's a takeaway when we're talking about these difficult things, wiggle it out. Now today's conversation, we titled it Foundational Friendships Forged in Diversity. And the two of you have known each other for quite some time and have been for one another over the years. So I'd love for you to take us back to when you first met. And we're also going to talk about being a rockhead, but let's just start with how you first met.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Karen give her version. I don't know if she remembers when we first met, but I do.
I remember. I remember. I was walking into the detachment. We went to the University of Northern Colorado, and I was visiting for the first time because I knew I was going to be paying my own way through college. And so I met someone that told me about Air Force ROTC, and I said, sign me up. And I walked into the detachment. I was walking up the stairs into the building, and there was Reg. And who are you? Where are you from? And that was the first time we met. That's how I remember it.
No, you remember, I think, but you were with Debbie though, weren't you? Didn't she escort you up?
Yep.
Yeah, so we had the same memory. So I remember the first moment I saw Karen, right?
And I had a parachute jacket on. You remember those?
It was yellow. Yeah, the yellow parachute jacket. Yeah, the yellow parachute jacket. And I was coming out of where the juniors are, because it was down the hall. And I came around the corner, and you and Debbie were walking up, and I went, who's that? Right? Because I hadn't seen you in the deck before.
Yeah.
And then I knew I'd seen Debbie, but I didn't know her real well either. So I came over and introduced myself.
Yeah.
And it all started from there.
So it all started from there. Like, what happened next? I mean, you're still friends after all of these years. Maybe just walk us through a few of the moments that brought you closer together as friends, and even some of the maybe difficult times where you go away, come back. Really want to explore this topic of lifelong friendship.
Yeah, so I'll start, KB, and then you can jump in at any time. So that was the first time that I saw Karen, and then, like I mentioned, I knew Debbie Matthews. So we had a diverse group. It was myself, my brother, Karen, Deb, our friend Sue Fedro, and Fred Padaway, who's no longer with us. And of course, me and John, African American, Karen, Deb, Sue, Caucasian, Fred was Filipino. But the one common bond we had was ROTC, right? And our desire to go serve our country. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that are fundamental foundationally, right, is to have a common interest. Yeah. And our common interest was service, right? Service to our nation, right? To go do the things that needed to be done to preserve the freedoms that we have. And I think we all have that calling. Mm-hmm. All of us didn't go through long Air Force careers, and some of us didn't even go through Air Force careers, but that love of country and that calling to defend our freedoms is, I think, something that's held us together to this day. Would you agree, Karen?
Yeah, and you know, in thinking about our relationship, it was you know, just so much of this diversity and humanity. The whole thing is focusing on what makes us similar instead of what makes us different. And I think that's the polarizing piece in so many of the conversations. And because, you know, because of that love of country and, you know, working part-time jobs and, you know, all the rigors of ROTC plus college in, you know, trying to make it through all of those little pieces and marching every Thursday and, you know, all of that. It was just, I think that it was really what brought us together. And I think one of the interesting moments, and I brought this up to Reg when he first talked to me about this chapter, was I said, do you remember when we were on one of our bus trips? So spring break for us was a bus trip in a school bus, literally, usually to another Air Force base or to visit the Air Force base or to compete against another ROTC detachment. And one of our trips took us through Utah, and this was, I think it was 1985, right in there. And we stopped at this diner and for breakfast, and they refused to serve Reggie and his brother John. And that was such an eye-opening experience for us, you know, and it was heartbreaking. It's like, here we are, you know, future defenders of the country, and society was not even close to mirroring, you know, what we felt about our friends, you know. So that was really interesting. And it's kind of made me, since that time, just that much more aware of, you know, some of the trials and tribulations that, you know, Reg has dealt with his whole life. You know, we've shared a lot of that. And my little Karen episode, although a blip and small piece of that, made me that much more aware of, you know, kind of how that can be kind of painful, and you're wondering, you know, about preconceived notions and assumptions about yourself, and going from there.
Yeah, so I'll just add a couple of things, Kayleigh. Did you have something to interject?
No, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so our group wasn't just diverse, you know, racial, ethnically, right? Like two of our members were had different sexual orientations, right? And that was a time in the military where if you came out, you weren't even allowed to serve, right? So it was even before don't ask, don't tell, right? And so we all knew, but literally they couldn't talk about it and they couldn't express themselves that way.
Yeah.
Even though underlying, but it was accepting, right? There's no judgment, no anything. From the very beginning, I think we all of us are like, you should be able to serve your country, right? Like you have the same calling as I do. Your sexual orientation shouldn't prevent you from being able to serve your country. I mean, if you want to go defend your country and die for your country, what does your sexual orientation have to do with any of that?
Yeah.
Nothing. So we all understood that. And it was at a time too, I'm going to bring this back to the diversity piece where women couldn't be pilots, right? You remember, Karen? And Deb wanted to be a fighter pilot. And again, I was like, that's wrong, right? I mean, you see, these girls are awesome. They're smart, they're intelligent, they're talented. They could be Top Gun just like anybody else. So I think that bonded us too. We all were dealing with our own challenges in terms of here we are as people, and here's society, and here's how society is viewing us and kind of putting us in a box and limiting us to what we can and cannot do. And God bless both KB and Deb, right? They're sweet, innocent people who haven't been exposed to this kind of stuff. So me and John went through Utah. First time I went to Utah, I now live in Utah, right? It's funny how God brings everything around. We were like, hey, just kind of so you know, because, you know, places have, I'm not trying to besmirch my great state that I live in, right? But it's like, hey, just so you know, right? And they were oblivious to it. So when me and John walked in, you get that sense, right? When you live in this skin your whole life, you kind of understand how you operate in the world, right? Again, not trying to prejudge people or any of that, right? But you just know. And I think where we stopped was in Beaver, Utah, which I was like, that's a strange name for a city. But there is a city called Beaver, Utah. And we went in, and of course, and KB can attest to this too, when I was back in Iowa, when two black guys and a Filipino walk in with three white girls and two blonde white girls, people look, right? And they look for all kinds of reasons, some of them not good, right? because they're like, what's going on with that? On top of any racial prejudice they might have. So of course we walk in and the girls they're oblivious, right? They're like, oh, we're just walking into a nice diner, right? It's just a nice diner. And we sit down, and I think the reason that you don't want to project, right? But I think the reason the person didn't serve us, me and John, was not so much that we were Black, but we were Black with white women. She was not rocking with that. And there was no romance type of thing going on, but she just was feeling some kind of way about that, right? But this was the first time those girls had been exposed, women had been exposed to that. And me and John were like, let's go.
Welcome to our world. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to go to jail, right? Like, let's just get up out, not make a scene, because, you know, I don't want to be in handcuffs, especially being in ROTC. So we'll just go.
So, I mean, what a eye-opening and life-shaping and friendship forging experience that you had at the diner in Utah. How would you describe, you know, what's transpired since in terms of how you've been able to support each other in different ways throughout your careers and throughout your life?
Karen, I'll let you go first again.
Yeah. Well, you know, through the ups and downs, marriage, divorce, you know, loss of family, we've all been there, you know, and it's like we may not talk for 6 months or even a year, and it's like we get back together. And I'll share closer to the end about Reggie coming out too. So it's just you know, just to support me in a time, and the remaining rocks coming out and supporting me during a really rough time I had recently. So I think it's, you know, I was trying to think about our friendship and what made us different too. And I think, you know, 5 out of the 6 were from military families. So, you know, you've had to learn how to assimilate and probably have a greater appreciation for other cultures, lived in other countries. I moved 5 times growing up because my dad worked for the airlines, and then was an exchange student. So I had that on my side. So, you know, thinking last night, I was like, how can adults gain that appreciation if they haven't had that exposure? You know, if you've lived in, nothing wrong with it, if you've lived in one place your entire life, and I'm thinking of the little town my parents retired to, and you've never seen an African-American person, you know, how do you develop that appreciation and that welcoming nature and that curiosity, you know, to really want to mesh with somebody else if you haven't had that exposure. So just thinking about that.
You know, and Karen, it sort of makes me think about the wiggle that we just talked about. Like, how do you just get back to that innate childlike curiosity, you know, without judgment, without like thinking about it too much, but just like staying open, staying curious and learning, you know, when you're right, when you haven't had all of the experiences like you've had and like so many of the authors in the book have. Reggie, anything you'd like to add before? I'd love for us just to spend a few moments on each of your individual chapters too.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's just rooted in a deep love and respect, right, for each other as human beings. Right? When you pull away all the tapestries, right, all the layers as we talked about this during the summit and the book, and when you just get down to a human and connecting to a human, and you know, we met each other when we were all young, right, and now we've grown together, but the Rockheads and Fred, Wilma, and Bam Bam, we're still the same. And when you get us together, I was telling Karen, I felt so bad for her son when we were together in Iowa for her father's funeral, which she'll talk about. But her point is, we all went our separate ways, right? Our careers, did our things. We're not like in one of those friend groups where we're IMing each other every day. Like she said, we might not talk to each other for 6 months, 9 months. But when you pick up the phone, it's like never skip a beat, right? Like we're there for each other. And so poor Jackson had to sit in the car with me, John, and Debbie as we told glory days stories for 2.5 hours, right? And I'm like,
2 hours.
And we're just, you know, literally like we're crying, like tears are coming out. He's like, please get me out of this car, right? But I think that's what it is, Kayleigh. We talk about the ties that bind and our commonality and humanity, right? And I think it's just a love and respect and appreciation, and it's just grown over the years.
Well, Karen, just to clarify for our audience, like what we're talking about with the Rockheads, I'll read a line from Karen's chapter. Karen writes, in college, my friend group called themselves the Rockheads. Here are two right here. Why? I'm not sure, but there's an empty Coors Light keg somewhere containing those secrets. We all adopted nicknames from the cartoon, The Flintstones. So yeah. These are where we're hearing these names from and how it would all came to be our secret lore back at a college party.
So, Kayleigh, I can explain that really quick, right? And it actually, I'm going to tattletale on myself, and it's maybe a cringy moment for me because it showed some of my my bias, right? And Karen, you may not remember this, and I'll make this quick, right? Because I was chauvinistic when I was younger. Right? Karen's shaking her head. She knows, right? So we all were getting together to study, and I was not the studious one in the group. Let's start with that. So we were all getting ready to study. I don't know if you remember, KB, over at Sue's house, and Sue had an apartment she shared with a friend on the west side of town by that park, right? And so it was a Saturday. We were all supposed to go study, and of course, Reggie's habitually late. So that's that, right? So Reggie's late. They're all there. I show up. Remember, Sue had like that little deck with the hammock on the outside. They're studying, right? I have no intentions of studying, right? I was not the best student. Let's just say that, right? So I'm late, and I'm not intense. And they're studious. They're good students. So I get there, and they're like, Reg is late again. So I go swinging on the hammock like it's a party, right? I'm like, hey, so what are you guys doing? And so somehow, and I was late because I was doing things I weren't supposed to do. Let's just say that. And it had to do with the opposite sex. So we'll just keep that there. Right. So somehow the conversation came up about girlfriends. And I think they were teasing me that I was going to have a girlfriend. Mind you, I already had a girlfriend, so that's another problem. Right. And they said, Reg, have you ever just had like girlfriends? And me, being the rockhead that I am, went, girlfriends? Like, what does that even mean? Right? Like, what's the purpose? Literally, like I'm saying, it's like, what? If I'm not interested in a girl, where's the time for friends? Like, what's that all about? Right? Like, I was an alien. I was like, what do you mean, girlfriend? Okay. What are you talking about? Right? And I think it was Karen or Deb said, Reggie, rockhead. Right? But it made, and then they started calling me Rockhead Reggie, but it made me realize my own biases, because here I was with two women who were my best friends, besmirching the whole idea of, so my thoughts about women's value, all of that, right, came right to my face, but it helped me grow, right? So I say later on, I'll talk about if I believe there's hope for humanity because there's hope for me. Because if this knucklehead who was who he was can change and grow, others can too. And now I'm a huge advocate for women, and KB knows that, right? But yeah, so then I was Rockhead Reg, and Fred Flintstone was the leader of the Flintstones, and then we all just adopted that. But that's where that started.
Well, I really like the message that you share within that, where it's like, if there's hope for you, there's hope for us all, there's hope for us to like see and like have things sort of shown to us, and maybe things that are even like they're kind of right under our nose and we just haven't been able to really see them, like the moment that you had. And so there has to be grace in these conversations for change, because without grace, without space, then we are just stuck in a cycle of shaming, of blaming, of being like, oh, you can't change. And like, I can't believe you think that way, Reggie. That's so chauvinistic. Like, you will never be redeemed, and we can't live in that world if what we're really desiring is to feel whole and to feel a connection to other people. I want to just talk for a moment about each of your chapters. I highly encourage those of you watching to read these chapters. And Karen, let's start with yours. You title your chapter, you went for it, and I'm so proud of you. Your chapter is called My Name is Karen. And in your chapter, as you share, you don't write from the voice of a victim whatsoever, but you do just express your genuine feelings of what it's been like to live in a world where the name Karen has been co-opted by the culture and memed about and put on with all of these sort of racist and obnoxious connotations. And so I'd love for you to express kind of what that has been like for you and how it felt actually sharing about it in this way.
Yeah, well, thanks to you, Kayleigh, for even kind of bringing that awareness to the forefront for me. You know, you and I had a conversation about what my chapter was going to be about, and you know, what one thing do you not like about yourself? And I pondered, and there were many, many things on my list, but the one thing I couldn't change and wasn't going to change was my name. And I realized in our conversation that I had changed the way I navigated my life. And although, like I say in my chapter, I don't feel like a victim at all, but it changed a lot in terms of, you know, not giving my name for reservations, not writing my name on the Pilates little board. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm assuming the worst in people by not doing that. But then again, I'm like, I don't want anybody associating me with the classic, you know, horrible Karen. And it still comes up. You'd be surprised. You know, I keep hoping it's going to lose its sparkle and that young people won't use the term. But I would say once every 2 weeks, I'm asked that annoying question, you know, oh, are you a Karen? You know, and it's not out of any sort of malice, but at the same time, you know, I think about how it's been used in a work setting. And I share one example in the chapter about someone, you know, in my presence talking to somebody else saying, hey, did you go all Karen on them? And I'm like, you know what? If you said, hey, did you go all Juan on them? Did you all go all, you know, use a name that's ethnically oriented? That's a slur. And it you know what it brought to mind for me is I want to be super careful and cognizant of the words that I say. And if I see somebody being a jerk or see injustice, call it what it is. Don't I think, you know, I look up on that Reddit site that I mentioned in the book, that FU Karen Reddit site. There's anywhere from 500 to 1,000 people on there at any one time. And to me, it's like, wow, I hope these people can find a better way to use their time and a better way to call out bad behavior. I'm all for calling out bad behavior, but, you know, through this process, it was very, and researching how it came about, talking to other Karens, and looking at how drastic the shaming and the nameism came for some people. It hasn't for me. I don't feel like I'm a victim of anything, but it has for some. And so it's been very enlightening. It's actually been a gift. It makes me more, I think it makes me a better friend, I hope, to Reg and people that have gone through this their whole lives, and to a whole different extreme. I mean, this is nothing, but it's been a fabulous experience. I'm so grateful for it.
And what's so, I know, I would just say for those watching and listening, you know, you do go into the history and the research. And I think, you know, when people don't understand where these things have come from and what it means, like I really appreciated you doing that, of like taking the extra time to do the work and research and share in your chapter. And, you know, to what you were saying of like, can we name behaviors and not people? In the second to last paragraph, you say, let's encourage the use of precise language, not someone's name. Seth Cohen Forbes staff writes, without naming the behaviors and biases explicitly, meme-like labels mask the inherent offensiveness and hurtful attitudes of these individual actions. Only when behavior is explicitly called out can it be seen for what it is and for what it represents. And I feel like it's so true. And I'm grateful that you shared your experience in this chapter, and there's so much more to say on it. So we'll come back in just a moment. Reggie, anything you'd like to add to that before I want to ask you a question about your chapter?
The only thing I would add is when that all started happening, I felt so bad for my friend Karen. So when that whole trend came up, and
yeah,
I never called her during it. because I didn't want to spark any offense, right? Part of me knew it wouldn't, right? But just that kind of image and the moniker and what was associated with it was so not like who she is a person at all, 100%. And it just hurt my heart to know that she was going to have to go through some of the burden that us of color carry, right? But like she said, and we've had a conversation, the benefit of that is she felt a little bit of what that feels like to carry that burden. And for, I'll just speak for myself, but you get so accustomed to it to navigate in this world that you don't even realize you're carrying it, right? I was in the military, and sometimes you go on ruck marches and those kind of things. And one of the great things about, I was assigned with the Army too, and they go on 10-mile ruck marches. You know, we Air Force guys, they call us sissies, right? So they're not used to Air Force guys doing that, right? But the point was, you know, at about mile 7, you're like, I want this thing off my back, right? I got 40 pounds. They'll literally, because I was the 25th ID, they'll put rocks in your ruck, right? So I'm marching around with 40 pounds of rocks. And 7 miles in, you get tired and you go, I want this off my back. And it's such a relief when you bivouac at mile 10 and you get that thing, you get to go ba-boom and take that weight off of you, right? But in our today's society, in our world, you don't realize when you look like me that you're carrying that all the time, right? To navigate in society. So you don't really get to take your ruck off, right? You just kind of learn to be accustomed to it and carry the weight. And until something like this happens, sometimes you don't even, I don't know how to explain it, but you don't even, it shocks you back into the fact that you have one because you've gotten so used to carrying it. It's just part of life. So I felt bad that my friend had to experience that, but it was also good because she saw that perspective, and with her kind heart, she really understood it.
You know, as you share that, Reggie, what I'm sort of realizing the similarity with kind of what we're all experiencing is, you know, Karen, with what's happened with your name, Reggie growing up, especially at the time and the places that you were going, being African-American, me being gay, like the contortions that we do, and we kind of don't even realize it. So Karen, when you're like, oh, I'm going to not use my name anymore here, I know the things that I choose not to say, again, trying to make everyone comfortable. Like there are all these weights and contortions. And now we're kind of walking around the world like this instead of upright and feeling just like who I am. Take me, leave me, like this is who I am. And I feel like this is happening at large. Like I know so many people can relate to this, of the contortions that we do trying to fit in, and we don't, and for so long we don't even realize it. And then it's brought to your awareness and you're like, wait, okay, can I choose to take off this backpack? And as a result, can I have allies in society that also start to like take off the backpacks, the things that are kind of keeping that contortion going on? Reggie, let's come to you, and then we'll close here in a few minutes. You write in your chapter is called "Diversity is Humanity," and you know, I think you'll share this afternoon the story of your birthplace and why that's so significant. But I'd love to talk to you in this conversation about your heritage and the surprise of your heritage that you share in your chapter, where you're like, wait, what? Tell us what happened.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. So in my chapter, I talk about like identity, right? And that's part of this whole conversation, your personal identity, how you identify with the rest of humanity, and those kinds of things. And, you know, being African-American and coming from slaves, you're disconnected from that, right? Like you literally don't know where your family came from unless you do a whole bunch of research and stuff. So you're here, but you don't know where you came from, right? And so I've always had, and I think all humans have had, a need for connection, right? I'll talk about this afternoon, connectiveness, right? The fact that we're all humans. And so as I was growing up, you know, both my parents were from Alabama and my dad was in the military. So we'd always go down in the summer, and my father's mother, Essie Mae Hall, looked Native American, right? And everybody in my family is like, yeah, Grandma Essie Mae, she's, you know, she's half Native American, and we have that blood in us and stuff. And I resonated with that, right? And I talk about that in the book so much. I mean, just, I have a heart for indigenous peoples, right? And so feeling that I was a part of that, right? It gave me a connection that I didn't have to Africa, right? So I had a connection here in America with Americans, right? Native Americans, right? So I had pride in that, right? And so I began to want to research that more, empathize with it, explore, so much so that I went, you know what, I'm gonna do one of those 23andMe's and find out exactly how much I have, right? Right? I want to know. So I'm giving away some of the book, right? But I took the test and I don't have a drop of Native American blood in me. And I was like crestfallen. Like you should, I mean, I'm a grown man, I'm crying. I'm like, what? Like I've been lied to all my life. Like there's like not a, I'm not, I like went through my results. Like I'm like, come on. And then I was like, okay, researching, can they get this wrong? Do DNA tests come back wrong? Like there's gotta be some in me because I feel so strongly about it, right? So you know, and in the book I say I lost like was that whole imposter syndrome from a different way, right? Like who I thought I was all my life genetically, I'm not, right? But then, like I say, it was like how the Grinch stole Christmas, right? Like I realized, wait a minute, and this is what I talk about in my book. I don't have to be Native American to resonate with, support, empathize with Native Americans because I'm human, and the humanity within me connects me to that and all people, right? We're connected. We're one people, and I talk about that in my book. So what we were talking about earlier in the contortions, right? It shouldn't be that way, and it doesn't have to be that way. And if we view diversity as humanity, that's how it was intended. We're all one people.
And what I love is, as readers will find out, you explore the divine dichotomy and how, okay, at the end of the day, maybe you didn't have Native American blood, but you also share of just how similar our DNA strands are, and therefore how little difference there is actually between us. And the difference is beautiful, and the diversity is what makes us human, but also there's so much more that unites us, as you share.
Yep.
So in the backdrop of writing this book, and right before we went to formatting and editing, Karen, your father passed away. And, you know, we've talked about behind the scenes, your willingness to share here, what that experience was like for you, your connection with him, and how Reggie also showed up for you in this time. I'd like you to share.
That is really good. So I was going to wait and surprise him with the book, you know, and I'm so glad I didn't. So I sent Dad, who was a very, think I'm introverted. he's a man of few words, but a brilliant man. And so I was nervous about sharing my chapter with him. He's so well read. I mean, he's you know, Scientific America, you know, stuff that's way beyond my intelligence. But so I sent him a draft, and I saved, it was so special because he emailed me back, and he hardly ever emails. And he said, "I'm sorry your name has been cast in the negative, but extremely proud of your stand for the positive, Karen." "Your mom and I were proud of your name. Stick with the positive. Is this going for review? If so, good luck. Love, Dad." And then PS, am I too late to put $20 on the Chiefs? So he passed 9 days later suddenly, but it was such a gift for me to be able to share that with him. And we had a great conversation after that. I'm saying, you know, don't be sorry. I said, this was a gift. I just wanted him to be aware. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm glad your mom didn't know about this," you know, because she was my biggest cheerleader. But then the rocks came to the rescue. Everybody goes through this, losing their parents, but Debbie, Reg, and John all flew out, and Webster City, Iowa is not easy to get to. So they came out, and the funniest thing was Webster City is not very diverse. There's some Hispanic population, Cambodian too, but I've never personally seen an African-American person in town. And we go to this, we all meet up at the bar when they fly in and land, and it was the classic movie. It's all the heads just like this. And well, they do that to me too, because I'm not from there, but it was interesting. So it was a wonderful, my dad would have been so pleased to have such a diverse attendance at his service. And yeah, I was very, very grateful. It just talks to showing up for each other after 40 years.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. And you know, for me, the real purpose in creating these spaces and this company is, you know, for connections to be made, including ones like the one that you had with your father right before he passed. And so like we are celebrating a lot, and there's all the accolades, and we're doing the summit, and maybe what I feel emotional alongside you is like, but this is the stuff that like for me means the most. So
yeah, well, thank you for that, Kayleigh, too. This is the good stuff, right? This is, to me, this is what we've written all about. This is the good stuff, right? Human beings loving each other, picking each other up, supporting each other, being there for each other. My only piece to what KB said, and KB, thank you for having the courage to share that, you know, publicly, is and I won't go into but it was sudden. Her dad passed away suddenly and unexpectedly, right? Surprise, shockingly, right? And KB's an introvert and she's a strong person, but you know, she texted me and you know she was devastated because it was not expected. He wasn't sick or anything like that. And then you know she had to go take care of the arrangements, and we all immediately said we got to go, we got to be there, right? And I think she was surprised a bit that we would come, right? I think because her husband Rick was like, you know, thank you so much for coming. And it's what we talked about in one of our talks, Kayleigh, right? With those little kids, when I think it was Quentin who said he walked by the preschool and the kid fell down and said, help me up. And of course, all the other kids, of course, I'll help you up. So I told Rick, of course, we'll be there for KB. That's not even a question, right? Of course, we're going to be there and pick up and love on and support our dear friend. And that's what humanity is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be what we live in. I talk about the dark shadows of false reality. I'll talk about that later. We live in false reality. That kind of stuff, the good stuff, is the reality we're supposed to live in. That's more of life to its fullest.
you know, we've talked about the full spectrum of diversity, the full spectrum of life in this conversation, and your lifelong friendship and new things coming into the world and other things passing from this world, and yet the feeling and the connection being eternal and always there. And Kristen, we see you in the comments. Thank you for sharing your support for Karen, for of course being on this journey with us. And I want to thank you both, Karen and Reggie, for embodying this experience in the way that you live, that you show up for each other, in the words that you share in your chapter, which I hope that more and more people continue to read, to connect with, and to reach out to you about. And I just want to thank you so much, and our audience so much, for being here with us in this conversation today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kayleigh. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Love and prosperity to everyone. Thank you for coming.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.